In November of 2021, I was driving through northern Georgia, heading back home from visiting my sister in Asheville. It was late, maybe close to midnight, and a heavy rainstorm had rolled in without warning. I took a back-road shortcut I'd used before, but the weather made visibility awful. The GPS kept losing signal, and my wipers were struggling to keep up with the downpour. That stretch of road ran through a rural patch. No lights, no houses, just woods on either side and the distant echo of thunder. I was halfway through that stretch when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder of the road, just past a curve. My headlights hit her for only a moment, but long enough to see she wasn't dressed for the weather. Barefoot, wearing what looked like a hospital gown, soaked and clinging to her skin. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stared as I passed. I slowed down, heart racing, unsure what I was supposed to do. I thought about turning around, maybe offering help, but something about the way she stood there made my gut twist. Still, guilt got the better of me. I drove a little further up, found a wider patch of gravel to pull over, and turned the car around. By the time I made it back to that spot, she was gone. I drove up and down that road twice. No sign of her, no tracks, nothing but rain slamming down and the rhythmic swish of my wipers. I assumed maybe she'd run off into the woods, maybe afraid, maybe not in the right state of mind. I even got out with my flashlight and called out, hoping to hear something, anything, but the forest just swallowed my voice. Eventually I gave up and drove home, shaken but trying to be rational. I told myself I'd call local authorities in the morning and let them know where I'd seen her. But as I pulled into my driveway, my headlights caught something odd. My back passenger side door was slightly ajar. I hadn't opened it all night. I sat there staring at it through the rain-covered windshield, dread creeping up my spine. The car interior light was on, casting a faint glow that revealed nothing obvious. I got out slowly, walked around and opened the door fully. The seat was wet, not just damp, soaked, like someone had been sitting there, clothes drenched, dripping onto the fabric. I checked the locks. All had been engaged while I drove. I never heard the door open, never saw the light come on while on the road. There was no one in the car. I went inside, locked everything and barely slept. The next morning I reported the incident to the county sheriff. They took it seriously, sent a patrol to sweep the road, but found nothing. No missing persons report matching the description. No signs of anyone in the area. I felt a little crazy explaining it, but the wet seat was real, and I had no explanation for how it got that way. I tried to forget about it, tried to move on, but a few nights later, during another storm, I woke up to a soft tapping. At first I thought it was tree branches against the siding, but it was rhythmic, slow, deliberate. I got up, walked to the front window and moved the curtain. There she was, standing at the edge of my front lawn, soaked in rain, same hospital gown, head tilted slightly, hands at her sides. Not moving, not even blinking. I froze. My instinct was to call the police again, but something in me whispered that she wouldn't be there when they arrived. I closed the curtain slowly, backed away and waited. After what felt like an hour, I checked again. She was gone. I told a friend about it, half expecting him to laugh, but instead, he asked where exactly I saw her on that highway. When I told him, he went quiet, then said his cousin used to live not far from that stretch, near an old state-run mental hospital that had been shut down in the late 90s. There had been rumors that some patients had gone missing during the shutdown, unaccounted for in the paperwork, just vanished. I tried researching it online, but the facility's records had been scrubbed or buried. All I found were a few archived newspaper blurbs about unresolved operational issues and an incident involving a staff member who disappeared on a night shift. Weeks went by with no more sightings. Then one night, I walked out to my car during another rainstorm just to grab something I left inside and froze halfway down the driveway. There were footprints, bare, small, leading from the edge of the street, down my gravel path, straight to my back passenger side door. Then back out again. The car was locked. I never saw her again after that, but every time it rains, especially when I'm driving late at night, I glance in the rearview mirror just a little too often. And every time I pass that curve in the road near the woods, I keep expecting to see her, waiting. In May of 2020, I was living in a quiet suburb outside of Eugene, Oregon. It was a small rental home tucked between tall pine trees. The kind of place where you could go days without seeing your neighbors if you didn't want to. I'd recently started working from home full-time and was adjusting to the isolation. It rained a lot that month, more than usual. Not just drizzles, but long, relentless storms that made the days blur into each other, that kind of cold, steady rain that doesn't let up for hours, tapping the roof and windows like a metronome set to dread. One evening, the power went out during a particularly nasty downpour. It wasn't unusual. Trees fell often, and lines got knocked down easily around here. I lit a few candles and settled into the living room with a blanket, trying to read. But the atmosphere in the house felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened. It was the silence underneath the rain that unsettled me. Usually there were distant sounds, cars, branches, wind, but tonight it was just the rain. I felt like I was underwater. Then came the knock, 3 slow knocks on my front door. I froze. No one ever came out here unannounced. Not at night, not in this weather. I waited, thinking maybe it was debris blown against the door, but then it came again. 3 knocks. Deliberate, evenly spaced, not frantic, not angry, just patient. I approached the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. I stood for a while, listening to my own heartbeat, trying to rationalize it. Then I walked back to the couch. The moment I sat down, the knock came again, but this time from the back door. I didn't have a peephole on that one, just a window with closed blinds. I crept toward it and pulled them aside slowly. Nothing. The porch light was out, so all I could see was the reflection of my own face in the glass. But I swear I saw a shadow move just at the edge of the yard, like someone stepping out of view. I locked the door and backed away, grabbing my flashlight from the kitchen drawer. I checked all the doors and windows. Locked, secure. I convinced myself it was just my nerves, the storm, the isolation. I went to bed early, leaving the flashlight on the nightstand. Around 2:30 a.m. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. It was knocking again, but this time softer. And it wasn't coming from the front or back door. It was coming from the window, above my bed. That made no sense. The window sat almost 8 feet off the ground, with no ledge or access from outside. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The knock came again, 2 taps, then silence, then one more, a rhythm, like a signal. I didn't dare open the curtain. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning the power was still out. I stepped outside as the rain finally started to fade into a dull mist. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the dirt just beneath the bedroom window were footprints. Bare, human, and small, like a child's. They led away into the woods and disappeared after about 10 feet. I reported it. The sheriff came by, took a look, nodded a lot, said it was probably a prank or a lost camper. But the footprints? He didn't have an explanation for how someone reached that high window. He left, promising extra patrols. I didn't feel reassured. 2 nights later, during another storm, I was woken again. This time, not by knocking, but by dripping. I thought it was the roof leaking. I turned on my flashlight and followed the sound, expecting to find a puddle. But instead, I found something worse. A wet handprint on the inside of my living room window. It was fresh, sliding downward as if someone had pressed their palm against it and slowly dragged it down. My heart started pounding as I backed away. Then the knocking returned, but not from the doors or windows. It was coming from inside the house. Soft knocks on the walls, moving like someone walking the perimeter, tapping as they went. I turned on every light I could and shouted, demanding whoever it was to leave, but no response came, just that knocking continuing, circling, closing in. Then it stopped. Everything went quiet, even the rain. For a full minute I stood frozen. Then came a single deafening knock right behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting across the room, and caught nothing, just empty air. But on the wall, in faint condensation, were the words, "You heard me," that was it. I packed a bag, drove to a friend's place in town, and didn't go back until the storm season passed. Eventually I broke my lease. The landlord didn't seem surprised, said the house had trouble keeping tenants. Before I left, I took one last walk around the property. Near the tree line, I found something half buried in the mud. A child's raincoat, torn, faded, with small handprints on the inside. It hadn't rained for days. I never looked through that window again. In July of 2023, I was driving across western Kansas, trying to make it home to Colorado after a work trip had run longer than expected. I didn't plan on stopping, but somewhere between Salina and Hayes, a thunderstorm rolled in out of nowhere. The skies went black so quickly it felt like dusk had fallen in the middle of the afternoon, and within minutes, sheets of rain turned the highway into a blur. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. I pulled off at the nearest exit and found a small single-story roadside motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The sign buzzed dimly through the rain. Only 2 cars sat in the lot. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as I checked in. She handed me a key labelled Room 209 and slid a receipt across the counter. I hesitated. I'd only seen one story from the outside. She noticed my expression and muttered that a second level had been added in the back years ago. I took the key, nodded, and jogged through the downpour. The back of the building had a staircase, slick with rain, leading to a narrow outdoor walkway. My room was the last on the row. I opened the door and was hit with a wave of stale air. The room was colder than it should have been, almost damp. The lights flickered once when I turned them on, then held. It was plain: bed, desk, a TV bolted to the wall, and an old armchair in the corner. The carpet was worn and smelled faintly of mildew, but it was better than the storm. I settled in, pulled out my laptop and tried to get some work done, but the rain only got worse. Thunder cracked so violently at one point it rattled the windows. That's when I noticed something strange. The storm sounded wrong. It was raining hard, but the water wasn't hitting the windows like before. It was as if the sound of the rain had been recorded and was playing from somewhere nearby, too consistent, too smooth. I got up, opened the curtain and looked outside. There was nothing there, no rain, no lightning, just pitch-black sky and a row of unlit windows across from mine. I blinked, confused, and opened the door. Dry air hit me immediately. The walkway was bone dry. The sky was dark, sure, but not stormy. There was no rain, no wind. Yet inside my room, the sound of the storm continued, louder now. I closed the door, and the moment it shut, I was back in the middle of a raging thunderstorm. I stood there, listening. The TV began to flicker on its own, static. Then a moment of footage, grainy, black and white, showing a hallway. The camera tilted slowly. Something crawled past the frame. I grabbed the remote, tried to turn it off. It wouldn't respond. I unplugged it from the wall. The screen stayed on for 3 more seconds before it went dark. The lights went out a moment later. The room was plunged into complete darkness. Then I heard a knock on the inside of the bathroom door. Not the front door, not the wall. The bathroom from inside. It was soft. 3 knocks, then nothing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I stood there for at least a minute, frozen, my eyes adjusting. The bathroom door creaked open slightly, and I could just make out a thin sliver of darker darkness behind it. I reached for my phone. No signal. I turned on the flashlight. The beam flickered as soon as I aimed it at the bathroom. Something in the shadows moved. Slowly, I stepped back. The air grew heavier. My chest tightened like the pressure had shifted. Then, in the corner of the mirror above the sink, something began to appear. Not a reflection, a face, pressed against the glass from the other side. Mouth, wide open like it was screaming, but I couldn't hear anything over the sound of the rain. Its eyes locked onto mine. The lights flashed back on for a single second, and in that moment the reflection vanished. The mirror shattered. The storm stopped instantly. Silence. Complete unnatural silence. I grabbed my bag and ran, fumbled with the door. When I stepped outside, the motel was wrong. The parking lot was empty. The front office was gone. Just trees. Dense black woods where the building had been. Behind me, the door to room 209 slammed shut on its own. I ran down the stairs and through the trees, pushing branches out of my way, soaked in sweat. Eventually, I stumbled out onto a different road, a 2-lane highway I didn't recognize. I flagged down a passing truck, and the driver stopped without asking too many questions. He said I looked like I'd been running for miles. He dropped me at the next town over. I told the police what happened, gave them the location and everything. They said that motel had burned down in 1997. Room 209 was where the fire started. They never found the person who checked in that night, just an unclaimed receipt with a name that didn't match any ID. The name on it was mine. Rain hides more than just the road. It blurs the line between what's real and what's waiting. If these stories left you chilled, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because sometimes the scariest things come when the storm begins.